The field trip had been a disaster from the start. Vivian Rhodes had known it the moment the second bus broke down, leaving her with 32 kindergartners, one overwhelmed teaching assistant, and a museum that had somehow lost their reservation. Now, 4 hours later, she was standing in the middle of a neighborhood she didn't recognize, her heart in her throat, searching for a 6-year-old girl who had vanished. Sophie Martinez. Brown pigtails, pink sneakers, a gap-toothed smile that could charm the devil himself. She'd been holding Vivian's hand one moment and gone the next, slipping away in the chaos of loading the children back onto the remaining bus. "Sophie!" Vivian's voice echoed off the brick buildings. "Sophie, where are you?" The street was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that spoke of eyes watching from behind curtained windows, of people who knew better than to interfere with whatever happened in this part of the city. Vivian knew she should call the police, should wait for help, should do anything other than wander alone through territory that made her survival instincts scream. But Sophie was 6 years old. Sophie was scared, and Vivian had spent her entire life protecting children that the world had forgotten. She wasn't about to stop now. The restaurant at the end of the block looked closed. Dark windows, heavy door, a sign in Italian she couldn't read. But as Vivian passed it, she heard something that made her stop cold. A child's voice. High and clear, drifting through a gap in the doorway. "Are you the good guy?" Vivian's blood turned to ice. She didn't think. She pushed through the door and stepped inside. The interior was dim, lit only by the afternoon light filtering through half-closed blinds. Tables and chairs had been pushed to the walls, creating an open space in the center where a group of men stood in a loose circle. They were all large, all wearing suits that bulged in places that suggested weapons, all turning to stare at her with expressions ranging from surprise to cold assessment. But Vivian barely saw them. Her eyes went straight to the center of the circle, where Sophie stood with her hands on her hips, looking up at the most dangerous man Vivian had ever seen. He was sitting in a chair that might as well have been a throne, dark wood, high-backed, positioned to command the room. His suit was charcoal, perfectly tailored, his shirt open at the collar to reveal a glimpse of ink beneath. His hair was black, swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and shadows, beautiful in the way that a blade was beautiful. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Dark as midnight, cold as a winter grave, fixed on Sophie with an intensity that made Vivian want to scream. "Sophie!" She lunged forward, but two of the men moved to block her path. "Let me through. That's my student." "Wait." The man in the chair held up one hand and everyone froze. His voice was low, quiet, accented with something Mediterranean. He hadn't looked away from Sophie. "The child asked me a question. I'm going to answer it." Sophie, seemingly oblivious to the danger she was in, tilted her head. "Well, are you?" The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Vivian saw the men exchange glances, confused, uncertain. As if this situation was so far outside their experience that they had no protocol for it. The man leaned forward, bringing himself closer to Sophie's level. His expression didn't soften. If anything, it grew more serious, more intent. "No, Piccola," he said quietly. "I'm not the good guy." Sophie's brow furrowed. "Then are you the bad guy?" "Some people would say so." "What do you say?" Another pause. The man's jaw tightened, and something flickered in those dark eyes, something that looked almost like pain. "I say that the world isn't that simple." His voice was rough. "I say that I've done bad things for reasons I thought were good. I say that I've hurt people who deserved it and some who didn't." He paused. "But I've never hurt a child, and I never will." Sophie considered this with the gravity only a 6-year-old could muster. Then she nodded, apparently satisfied. "Okay," she said. My teacher says everyone makes mistakes. She says what matters is if you're trying to be better. Your teacher sounds very wise. She's the best. Sophie beamed. She always finds me when I get lost. She's probably looking for me right now. She is. Vivian's voice came out stronger than she expected. The men blocking her path shifted, looking to their boss for guidance. And she would very much like to take you home now. The man's gaze lifted to meet hers for the first time. The impact was physical. Vivian felt it like a punch to the chest, those dark eyes cataloging her, assessing her, seeing straight through the fear to something underneath. She was acutely aware of how she must look: disheveled, desperate, a kindergarten teacher in a cardigan and sensible flats who had just burst into what was clearly a very private meeting. But she didn't look away. Couldn't. Something in his gaze held her pinned, like a butterfly under glass. "You're the teacher," he said. Not a question. Yes, Vivian Rhodes, Lincoln Elementary. She forced herself to stand straighter. Sophie wandered away from our field trip. I've been looking for her for over an hour. Please, let me take her home. She wandered into a place she shouldn't have been. His tone was neutral, unreadable. My men found her at the back door trying to catch a cat. There was an orange one, Sophie added helpfully. With a smushed face. I wanted to pet it. Despite everything, Vivian felt a hysterical laugh building in her throat. Of course. Of course Sophie had followed a cat into the heart of what was clearly mob territory. I apologize for the intrusion. She kept her voice steady through sheer force of will. We'll leave immediately. She won't say anything. She's 6. She doesn't understand what she saw. She saw men in a room. The boss rose from his chair and Vivian realized with a start just how tall he was. How broad. How much space he occupied. Not just physically, but atmospherically. Like a black hole bending light around itself. She asked a question. I answered. He looked down at Sophie. That's all that happened here. Yes? Sophie nodded solemnly. We talked about good guys and bad guys, and there was a cat. And there was a cat? The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. The movement transformed his face for just an instant, making him look almost human. Go with your teacher, Piccola. Don't wander off again. Okay. Sophie started toward Vivian, then stopped and turned back. What's your name? Sophie. Vivian started. Enzo, the man said. My name is Enzo. I'm Sophie. It was nice to meet you, Mr. Enzo. She waved, gap-toothed and fearless, then ran to Vivian and grabbed her hand. Can we go get ice cream? I'm hungry. Vivian pulled the child close, her heart hammering against her ribs. She needed to leave. Now. Before this strange spell broke, and these men remembered what they were supposed to do with witnesses. But as she turned toward the door, Enzo's voice stopped her. Miss Rhodes. She looked back. He was still standing in the center of the room, his men arrayed around him like soldiers awaiting orders. His dark eyes held hers with that same unsettling intensity. Your student is brave, he said quietly. She looks at monsters and asks them questions instead of running. That's rare. A pause. You should be proud of what you're teaching her. Vivian didn't know what to say. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Mob bosses didn't compliment kindergarten teachers. They didn't answer children's questions with painful honesty. They didn't let witnesses walk away. Thank you, she managed, for being kind to her. Something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like surprise. Go, he said, before I remember what I'm supposed to be. She went. The sunlight outside felt like waking from a dream. Sophie chattered beside her about the cat and the nice man and whether they could really get ice cream, and Vivian answered on autopilot, her mind still trapped in that dim room with those dark eyes. I'm not the good guy. She'd seen criminals before, had taught their children, visited their neighborhoods, learned to navigate the complicated moral landscape of a city where survival sometimes meant compromise. She knew that the world wasn't divided into heroes and villains, but she'd never met someone who admitted it so plainly, who answered a child's question with truth instead of lies or deflection, who looked at a 6-year-old girl with something that almost resembled respect. Enzo. His name was Enzo. She told herself it didn't matter, told herself she'd never see him again, that this was a strange story she'd tell at parties someday, that it meant nothing. But as she loaded Sophie into her car and drove away from that quiet street, Vivian Rhodes couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that a door had opened somewhere, just a crack. And she had no idea what was waiting on the other side. 1 week later, a black car appeared outside Lincoln Elementary. Vivian noticed it during recess, idling at the curb with tinted windows and an engine that purred like a predator at rest. She told herself it was nothing, told herself lots of people drove black cars, told herself that the prickling sensation at the back of her neck was just paranoia. But when the final bell rang and she walked her students to the pickup line, the car was still there. And leaning against it, arms crossed, watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes, was Enzo Marchetti. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Miss Rhodes. He pushed off the car and walked toward her, moving with the fluid grace of someone who had never been afraid of anything in his life. A word? I'm working. I'll wait. He did. For 45 minutes, while she supervised dismissal and answered parent questions and pretended she couldn't feel his gaze burning into her back. By the time the last child had been collected, her nerves were shredded. She crossed the sidewalk to where he stood, keeping her voice low. What are you doing here? You can't just show up at a school. I need your help. Whatever she'd expected him to say, it wasn't that. Excuse me. I have a problem. His jaw tightened, and something flickered in his expression, something that looked almost like vulnerability. A problem I think you might be able to solve. I'm a kindergarten teacher. I teach children to read and share and wash their hands. I don't solve problems for... She stopped herself. For people like you. People like me. A humorless smile crossed his face. You mean criminals, monsters, the bad guys. Your words, not mine. Fair enough. He glanced toward the school, then back to her. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I'm asking you to meet someone who matters to me more than anything in the world. His voice roughened. Someone I can't help, no matter how much I want to. Vivian studied him. The hard lines of his face hadn't softened, but something in his eyes had shifted. The cold assessment was gone, replaced by something rawer, realer. Who? My brother, Matteo. Enzo's hands curled into fists at his sides. He's 24. He has Down syndrome, and for the past 6 months he's been pulling away from everyone, from his caregivers, from our family, from me. His voice cracked on the last word. The doctors say it's depression. The specialists say they've tried everything. But I watched you with that little girl, with Sophie. I saw how she trusted you, how she felt safe with you. He met her eyes. I'm asking you to try. That's all. Just try. Vivian's chest tightened. She knew she should say no, should walk away from this man and his world and pretend none of this had ever happened. But she heard the desperation beneath his words. The love, the helplessness of someone who would burn cities for his brother but couldn't give him the one thing he needed. I'm not a therapist, she said carefully. I'm not qualified to treat depression or... I don't need qualifications. I need someone who sees people instead of problems. His gaze held hers. I need someone who looks at my brother and doesn't see a diagnosis, who treats him like a person, not a patient. Can you do that? That's all I've ever done. Then come. Meet him. 1 hour. He paused. If you can't help, I'll never bother you again. You have my word. And if I can? Something shifted in his expression. Then we'll talk. Against every instinct, against every rational thought in her head, Vivian nodded. 1 hour. The Marchetti estate was 30 minutes outside the city. A sprawling villa that looked like it had been transported from the Italian countryside, all terracotta and climbing roses and fountains that caught the evening light. Vivian followed Enzo through an arched doorway and down a hall lined with family photographs, her heart pounding with every step. She didn't know what she'd expected. Armed guards and dark rooms, maybe. The trappings of a criminal empire. Instead, she found warmth. Color. The smell of garlic and herbs drifting from somewhere deeper in the house. He's in the garden. Enzo stopped before a set of French doors, his hand on the handle. He may not respond to you. He barely responds to anyone anymore. But I wanted to... He stopped, swallowed. I wanted to give him one more chance. You love him very much. He's my brother. As if that explained everything. Maybe it did. Vivian stepped through the doors and into the garden. The young man sitting on the bench by the fountain looked up at her approach. He had Enzo's dark hair and olive skin, but his eyes were different. Softer, warmer, though shadowed now with something heavy. He was wearing a paint-stained shirt, and his fingers were smudged with colors that suggested he'd been creating something before the sadness pulled him under. Hi. Vivian stopped a few feet away, giving him space. I'm Vivian. I'm a friend of your brother's. Matteo didn't respond. His gaze dropped back to his hands. I saw your paint. She kept her voice light, conversational. Are you an artist? Nothing. I used to paint when I was younger. Badly, mostly. My sunsets always looked like they were on fire. She smiled. But I love the colors. The way they mix together on the canvas, becoming something new. Something that didn't exist before. Matteo's fingers twitched. His eyes lifted. Just a fraction. What do you like to paint? Vivian asked softly. For a long moment, silence. Then, so quiet she almost missed it. Birds! Behind her, she heard Enzo's sharp intake of breath. But she didn't turn around. She kept her eyes on Matteo, on the spark of something that had flickered to life in his gaze. Birds are beautiful, she said. Will you show me? Matteo looked at her, really looked for the first time. And then, slowly, he nodded. Okay. One word. One tiny spark of connection. But as Vivian followed Matteo toward his studio, she knew it was enough. It was a beginning. And she had no idea just how far it would lead her. The 1 hour became 2, then 4, then an entire evening. Matteo's studio was a riot of color, canvases stacked against every wall, paintings of birds in flight covering every surface. Swallows and sparrows and hawks and hummingbirds, captured in oils and acrylics, so vivid they seemed ready to take wing. Vivian moved through the space with genuine wonder, asking questions, listening to his answers, treating each piece like the treasure it was. By the time Enzo came to find them, Matteo was showing Vivian his technique for blending feathers. His earlier silence transformed into an eager stream of explanation. His eyes were bright. His hands moved with purpose. He looked, for the first time in months, alive. You should stay for dinner. Matteo grabbed Vivian's arm, his grip eager but gentle. Rosa makes the best pasta, and I can show you my sketchbooks. I have hundreds. Vivian looked at Enzo, a question in her eyes. Stay. His voice was rough. Please. She stayed, Dinner was nothing like she expected. The long table in the dining room filled with people, Enzo at the head, Matteo beside Vivian, and a rotating cast of cousins and uncles and aunts who appeared and disappeared throughout the meal. They laughed. They argued. They passed plates of food with the easy chaos of a family that had shared 1,000 meals together. And Enzo watched her through it all. She felt his gaze like a physical touch, tracking her movements, cataloging her smiles, noting every time she made Matteo laugh. The cold, dangerous man from the restaurant was still there, lurking beneath the surface. But here, surrounded by family, he was something else too. Softer, warmer, almost human. "You're staring," she murmured, when the conversation had moved on without them. "You're worth staring at." Heat flooded her cheeks. She looked away, focusing on her plate, willing her heart to stop racing. "My brother hasn't talked this much in 6 months." Enzo's voice was low, meant only for her. "Whatever you're doing, don't stop." "I'm not doing anything special. I'm just listening." That's exactly what's special about it. Over the following weeks, Vivian became a fixture at the Marchetti estate. She told herself it was for Matteo. He needed her, needed someone who saw past the diagnosis to the brilliant, creative, sensitive person underneath. She came after school 3 days a week, sometimes more. They painted together, walked in the gardens, talked about everything and nothing. Slowly, carefully, she helped him build a bridge back to the world. But she couldn't pretend that Matteo was the only reason she kept coming back. Enzo was there too, always there. In the library when she arrived, offering her coffee. In the garden when she left, walking her to her car. In the spaces between, appearing unexpectedly, watching her with those dark eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. They talked about her students, his family, the city they both called home, about her childhood in foster care, bouncing between houses, never belonging anywhere, about his father's death, the empire he'd inherited at 25, the weight of responsibility that never lifted from his shoulders. "You shouldn't be here," he said it one evening as they stood on the terrace watching the sun sink below the hills. "You're a good person, Vivian. You believe in kindness and second chances and all the things I stopped believing in a long time ago. This world, my world, it would destroy you." "Maybe." She turned to face him. "Or maybe you don't get to decide what destroys me and what doesn't." "You don't know what I've done." "Then tell me." He didn't answer, but his hand found hers in the darkness, and he held on like she was the only thing keeping him from drowning. It was Matteo who told her about Enzo's past. Our father was cruel. They were in the studio, Matteo working on a new painting while Vivian organized his supplies. He hurt people. He hurt Enzo. His voice faltered. "He hurt me." Vivian's heart clenched. "I'm so sorry, Matteo." "Enzo protected me. Always. Even when he was just a kid." Matteo's brush moved across the canvas in sure, steady strokes. "When Papa died, everyone thought Enzo would be the same. Cruel. Cold. But he's not." He looked at her, his eyes bright with something fierce. "He's good, Vivian. Even when he doesn't believe it. You make him believe it." "I don't." "You do." Matteo smiled. "I see how he looks at you. Like you're the sunrise after a very long night." Vivian didn't know what to say, so she said nothing and turned back to the paints and pretended her hands weren't shaking. But she couldn't pretend for long. The threat came without warning. Vivian was leaving school on a Friday afternoon when a car pulled up beside her. Not the sleek black vehicle she'd come to associate with Enzo, but something older, dirtier. The window rolled down, revealing a face she didn't recognize. Hard eyes, scarred cheek, a smile that made her skin crawl. "Miss Rhodes?" The man's voice was oily. The Marchetti family's new pet. How sweet. Vivian's blood turned to ice. She kept walking, reaching for her phone. I wouldn't. The man's tone hardened. My boss wants to send a message. You're going to deliver it. I don't know what you're talking about. Tell Enzo Marchetti that the Conti family hasn't forgotten. Tell him we know about his brother. We know about you. The smile widened. Tell him to watch his back. Because we're coming for everything he loves. The car pulled away, disappearing around the corner, leaving Vivian standing on the sidewalk with her heart pounding and her phone clutched in her trembling hand. She called Enzo. He arrived in 15 minutes, his face a mask of controlled fury. 2 SUVs full of men flanked his car, and the street that had seemed so ordinary moments ago suddenly felt like a war zone. Are you hurt? He was out of the car before it fully stopped, his hands finding her shoulders, her arms, her face. Did they touch you? I'm fine, they just talked. She was shaking. She couldn't stop. Enzo, who are the Contis? His jaw tightened. Enemies. A family I thought I'd neutralized years ago. His hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I should have protected you. I should have known they were watching. You couldn't have known. I should have. His voice cracked. You're not safe anymore. Not at your apartment. Not at your school. They know who you are, which means they know how to hurt me. How to hurt you? He went still. The mask slipped, just for a moment, and she saw everything beneath. The fear, the fury, the desperate, aching love he'd been trying to hide. Don't you understand yet? His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. You're not just Mateo's friend anymore. You're not just a visitor in my world. You're... He stopped, swallowed. You matter, Vivian. To Mateo. To me. More than I ever intended. More than I ever thought possible. Enzo dash dash. Come home with me. To the estate. Where I can keep you safe. His forehead pressed against hers. Please. I can't lose you. Not now. Not when I've just found you. She should say no. Should run from this world of violence and blood and impossible choices. Should protect herself the way she'd always protected herself, by keeping everyone at arm's length. But she thought of Mateo, finally emerging from his shell. She thought of Enzo standing in the darkness, holding her hand like she was his lifeline. She thought of the family that had welcomed her, the warmth she'd never known, the home she'd always wanted. Okay, she whispered, take me home. But even as she climbed into his car, she knew that safety was an illusion. The Contis were coming. And when they arrived, they would burn everything in their path, including her. The attack came 3 days later. Vivian had just finished reading to Mateo in the garden, a book about birds, his favorite, when the first explosion rocked the estate. The sound was deafening, a thunderclap that shook the ground beneath her feet and sent Mateo tumbling from his chair with a scream. Mateo! She grabbed him, pulling him close, shielding his body with hers. It's okay. I've got you. I've got you. Gunfire erupted somewhere in the house, shouts in Italian, the crash of breaking glass. Mateo was shaking against her, his hands clamped over his ears, his eyes squeezed shut. We need to move. Vivian's mind raced. Enzo had shown her the safe room, behind the library, through the hidden door disguised as a bookshelf. If she could get Mateo there, they'd be protected. They'd be safe. She pulled him to his feet. Stay with me. Don't let go of my hand. They ran. The house was chaos. Smoke poured through the hallways, thick and acrid, burning Vivian's eyes and throat. She could hear fighting somewhere ahead, the sharp crack of gunfire, the thud of bodies, the guttural sounds of men in combat. She pulled Mateo in the opposite direction, taking the long way around, praying they wouldn't be seen. They were almost to the library when a figure stepped out of the shadows. Vivian skidded to a halt. The man was tall and thin, with silver hair and a face like a skull, all sharp bones and hollow cheeks. His eyes were flat and dead, the eyes of someone who had long ago stopped seeing people as anything more than obstacles. The teacher. His voice was soft, pleasant, terrifying. And the idiot brother. How convenient. Mateo whimpered behind her. Vivian pushed him back, putting herself between him and the threat. Get out of our way. I don't think so. The man, Conti, she realized, this had to be the head of the family, stepped closer. Enzo Marchetti took something from me. My territory. My men. My pride. Now I'm going to take something from him. His gaze slid to Mateo. Starting with the retard. Rage erupted in Vivian's chest, hot and bright and blinding. Don't you dare call him that. Excuse me? His name is Mateo. He's an artist. He's kind and brilliant and worth 1,000 of you. Her voice shook with fury. And if you think I'm going to let you touch him, you're out of your mind. Conti laughed. It was a cold, empty sound. You're either very brave or very stupid, Miss Rhodes. Either way, it doesn't matter. He raised his hand, and 2 men appeared behind him, weapons drawn. Take them both. We'll see how long Marchetti's courage lasts when he's watching me break his pretty toys. The men moved forward. Vivian grabbed a vase from the nearby table, the only weapon she could reach, and hurled it at the closest one. It shattered against his chest, buying her a precious second. Run! She shoved Mateo toward the library door. The bookshelf, 3rd shelf from the bottom, push the red book. Mateo ran. Vivian turned to face the men, her hands raised, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. You're not getting past me! The first man laughed. Lady, you're 5 feet of nothing. Get out of the way. Make me. He reached for her. She ducked under his arm and drove her elbow into his throat, the way the self-defense instructor at the community center had taught her years ago. He staggered back, choking. The second man grabbed her from behind, pinning her arms. Enough. Conti's voice was ice. Bring her. We'll use her to draw Enzo out. They dragged her down the hallway, away from the library, away from Mateo. Vivian struggled and kicked and screamed, but it was no use. There were too many of them, and she was too small, and this was how it ended. In smoke and blood and the laughter of monsters. They emerged into the main foyer, and Vivian's heart stopped. Enzo was there. He stood in the center of the room, surrounded by bodies, some still, some groaning, with a gun in each hand and blood splattered across his face. His suit was torn, his knuckles were raw, and his eyes, those dark, dangerous eyes, were fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. Let her go. His voice was quiet, calm, more terrifying than any shout. Conti laughed. Or what? You'll shoot me? You do that, and my men kill her before she hits the ground. Then we're at an impasse. We don't have to be. Conti stepped forward, positioning himself behind Vivian like a shield. Give me what I want, and I'll let her live. The territory south of the river, the shipping routes through the harbor, and him. He jerked his chin toward the library, where Mateo had hopefully reached the safe room. The retard. No. The word came out before Vivian could stop it. Enzo, don't. Whatever he's asking, it's not worth it. Shut up. The man holding her tightened his grip, and pain lanced through her shoulders, but Enzo's eyes never left hers, and in them, she saw something she'd never seen before. Not the cold calculation of a crime boss, not the controlled fury of a man protecting his empire, but fear. Raw, desperate, all-consuming fear. He was afraid of losing her. Counteroffer. Enzo's voice was steady, but his hands, Those hands that had held hers so gently in the darkness were white-knuckled on his weapons. You let her go. You walk out of here. And I don't hunt down every single member of your family and make them watch while I tear you apart. Conti's smile faltered. You're bluffing. You came into my home, threatened my brother, put your hands on the woman I love. Enzo took a step forward, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. I'm not bluffing. I'm making you a promise. The woman I love. The words echoed in Vivian's skull. He loved her. Enzo Marchetti, the monster, the boss, the man who had built an empire on blood and fear, loved her. Killer, Conti snapped. The man behind Vivian raised his gun, and the window exploded. Glass rained down like deadly confetti. Men in black poured through the shattered frame, moving with military precision, weapons blazing. Conti's men scattered, screaming, falling. The grip on Vivian's arms vanished as her captor crumpled to the floor. She ran. Enzo caught her halfway across the foyer, pulling her against his chest with an arm like iron. Are you hurt? Did they? I'm fine. Matteo, the safe room. He's there, my men confirmed. His hands found her face, tilting it up toward his. Blood and smoke and chaos surrounded them, but his eyes were only for her. When I saw him holding you, when I thought, I know. She pressed her forehead to his. I know. I love you. The words came out broken, raw. I love you, Vivian. I tried not to. I told myself you deserved better, that I'd only destroy you. But I can't. I can't fight it anymore. Then don't. She kissed him. It was fierce and desperate, and tasted like smoke and blood and everything she'd been afraid to feel. His arms crushed her against him, and she let herself be crushed, let herself disappear into the heat and the want and the impossible, undeniable truth. She loved him too, the monster, the man, the broken soul who had looked at a child's question and answered with honesty instead of lies. When they finally broke apart, the battle was over. Conti's men lay scattered across the floor, dead or restrained, and Conti himself. Conti was on his knees, two of Enzo's men holding him down, his skull-like face contorted with fury and fear. What do you want me to do with him, boss? One of the men asked. Enzo looked at Vivian. His eyes held a question, permission maybe, or absolution. I told you what I am, he said quietly. I told you I'm not the good guy. I know. She touched his face, her palm against his bloodied cheek. But you're my guy, and that's enough. Something broke open in his expression, something that looked like hope. He turned to his men. Take him. Hold him until I decide what to do with him. You'll regret this, Conti spat. This isn't over. It is. Enzo's voice was final. The moment you touched her, it was over. You just didn't know it yet. They dragged Conti away, and Vivian sagged against Enzo's chest, the adrenaline finally draining from her body. She was exhausted, terrified, alive. Matteo, she said. I need to see Matteo. He's safe. I'll take you to him. Enzo pressed a kiss to her forehead. But first, thank you. For what? For protecting him. For standing between him and a man with a gun. His voice cracked. For being braver than anyone I've ever known. I'm not brave. She smiled weakly. I'm a kindergarten teacher. I just don't know when to quit. He laughed. A real laugh. Broken and beautiful, and pulled her close. Neither do I, he murmured against her hair. Neither do I. 6 months later, Vivian stood in Matteo's studio and watched him unveil his masterpiece. The painting was enormous, 6 feet tall and nearly as wide, depicting a flock of birds rising from darkness into light. Swallows and sparrows and hawks, all rendered in breathtaking detail, their wings outstretched toward a golden sky. At the center of the flock, slightly larger than the rest, flew two birds side by side, one dark, one light, their wingtips almost touching. "It's us," Mateo said, beaming. "The whole family. Rising up. Together." Vivian's eyes burned with tears. "Mateo, it's beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I'm going to give it to Enzo. For the wedding present." He paused, suddenly uncertain. "Do you think he'll like it?" "He'll love it." She pulled him into a hug. "He loves everything you make. He loves you." "He loves you too." Mateo's voice was muffled against her shoulder. "He's different now. Happier. You did that. We did that. All of us." The wedding was held at the estate on a perfect autumn afternoon. The garden had been transformed. White chairs arranged in neat rows, an archway of roses and ivy framing the fountain where Vivian had first met Mateo. The guest list was small, but meaningful. Family, close friends, a handful of Vivian's colleagues from Lincoln Elementary who had accepted her new life with remarkably little judgment. Sophie was there, of course. Now 7 years old, she'd been given the important job of flower girl, and she took her duties very seriously, marching down the aisle with military precision, scattering petals like a general deploying troops. And at the end of the aisle, waiting for her, stood Enzo. He was wearing a charcoal suit, perfectly tailored as always, with a white rose pinned to his lapel. His dark hair was swept back from his face, and his midnight eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. But it was his expression that stole her breath. Open, vulnerable, full of a love so vast it seemed to fill the entire garden. Vivian walked toward him on legs that trembled, her simple white dress catching the golden afternoon light. She'd never dreamed of a big wedding, never fantasized about white gowns and fairy tale romances. But this man, this family, this life she'd stumbled into by accident, was better than any fantasy she could have imagined. "You're beautiful." Enzo's voice was rough as she reached him. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You're not so bad yourself." He laughed, that broken, beautiful laugh she'd grown to love, and took her hands in his. The ceremony was simple. Traditional vows, spoken in voices that shook with emotion. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Mateo shouted, "No!" so loudly that the entire gathering burst into laughter. And when Enzo slid the ring onto her finger, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, the color of the sky in his brother's paintings, Vivian felt something click into place inside her. A piece she hadn't known was missing. Finally found. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The officiant smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Enzo cupped her face in his hands, those hands that had done terrible things, that had held her so gently in the darkness, and kissed her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. The reception spilled across the terrace as the sun sank toward the hills. Vivian danced with Mateo, then with Sophie, then with what felt like every member of the Marchetti family. She ate Rosa's incredible pasta and drank champagne that probably cost more than her old car. She laughed until her cheeks hurt and cried until her mascara ran. And through it all, Enzo watched her, the way he always watched her, like she was a miracle he couldn't quite believe. "Come with me." He found her as the stars were beginning to emerge, taking her hand and leading her away from the crowd. "I want to show you something." They walked through the garden to a spot she'd never seen before, a small clearing hidden behind a wall of climbing roses. In the center stood a bench, old and weathered, facing a view of the valley below. "My mother used to bring me here," Enzo said quietly, "when my father was difficult." She'd hold me and tell me that someday things would be different, that someday I'd find someone who made me want to be better than I was. He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her heart ache. She was right. He took both her hands in his. You make me want to be better, Vivian, every day, every moment. You look at me and you see something worth saving, even when I can't see it myself. Because it's there. She squeezed his hands. It's always been there. You just needed someone to remind you. A child asked me once if I was the good guy. A smile ghosted across his face. I told her no. I told her the world wasn't that simple. And now? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he lifted her hands to his lips and kissed them, one by one. Now I think, maybe it doesn't matter. Good guy, bad guy, those are just labels. What matters is what you do with the time you're given. Who you love, who you protect. His eyes held hers. You taught me that. You and Sophie and Mateo. You taught me that even monsters can find redemption if they're brave enough to reach for it. Vivian felt tears spilling down her cheeks. I love you, Enzo Marchetti. Every broken, beautiful piece of you. And I love you, Vivian Marchetti. He pulled her into his arms. My teacher. My heart. My home. They stood there together as the stars wheeled overhead, two people who had found each other against all odds, a kindergarten teacher and a crime lord, a woman who believed in second chances and a man who was learning to believe in himself. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real. And as Vivian leaned into her husband's embrace, listening to the distant sounds of laughter and music, she thought about Sophie's question all those months ago. Are you the good guy? Maybe the answer didn't matter. Maybe what mattered was trying. Every day, every moment, reaching for the light even when the darkness felt overwhelming. That was what she'd teach her students, what she'd teach her family, what she'd carry with her for the rest of her life. The good guy isn't a destination. It's a direction. And as long as you keep walking toward it, you're never truly lost. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video as your support is essential for me to continue creating content like this.